Welcome, everyone. Please stand by. The webinar will begin shortly.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar program, Marketing to Millennials, Essential Strategies for B2B and B2C. My name is Dean D'Ambrosi, Executive Vice President of Epicomm, and I'm your moderator for today's webinar. Please note the webinar is being recorded, and all participant lines will be muted during this broadcast. If you need technical assistance during the broadcast, please reach out to Tyler by email at tyler@epicomm.org or tkeeney@epicomm.org. You may also use the questions feature in the GoToWebinar dialog box for technical assistance. Today's presentation will last no longer than 60 minutes and includes time for questions and answers. You may ask questions at any time throughout the webinar service using the questions feature in GoToWebinar. But please be aware that they will not be answered until the end of the presentation. I'd like to thank today's sponsor of the webinar, AccuZIP. It is through a generous sponsorship that we can provide quality education such as this webinar. AccuZIP Inc. is a national software company based in Atascadero, California. They provide feature-rich solutions to manage contact data quality, address hygiene, USPS postal pre-sorting compliance, and mail tracking and reporting. Their products and services are designed to be utilized across many industry verticals to streamline, standardize, and simplify data entry, data management, and multi-channel communication workflows and processes. AccuZIP Technologies makes it easier for your business to get the message out to the right people at the right location when they need it the most. For 23 years, the company has built an outstanding reputation for value, service, and innovation. And now, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Trish Witkowski, the Chief Folding Fanatic at online print store foldfactory.com and President of Rock the Mailbox. An educator, author, speaker, award-winning designer, Trish specializes in creative solutions and engagement strategies for direct mail and is the curator of the world's most exciting collection of folded print samples. She hosts the popular e-video series 60-Second Super Cool Fold of the Week and is an instructor for lynda.com. Trish holds an MS in printing and a BFA in graphic design from RIT. Please welcome our presenter for today, Trish Witkowski.
Thanks, Dean. It is great to be here. Appreciate it. And Steve, I think Steve from AccuZip's on the line. Steve, are you here?
Yes, thank you, Trish, and thank you for your wonderful expertise on this very important subject.
Fabulous. Well, it's great to be here. I think you and I have kind of a fun East Coast, West Coast thing going on right now. I'm calling in from the HP Customer Experience Center in Atlanta, and I know you're over on the West Coast, so this is fun.
Yes, the delay is only 78 milliseconds, so we're good.
Well, awesome. Well, we have a lot of territory to cover today, so let's rock and roll, and feel free to just jump in, wherever you see fit. We've got a lot to cover, so it's going to be a lot of fun. So Thanks everyone for joining us. And as Dean said, we're talking about marketing to millennials today in both B2B and B2C environments. And I've been doing a lot of study on generational preferences in marketing. And it's because we've really seen so much change in just the way that we need to market based on millennials in general. So we're going to cover a lot of territory today. Please feel free to send in some questions, and we hope we'll get to field those for everyone. I want to set the stage, though, by just starting with who are we really talking about here? Who are the millennials? Let's start there. So millennials, or there they are in a very fun selfie. By the way, I'm Gen X, so the selfie thing is a bit of a challenge for me, but millennials are great at it, so there they are. So fun stuff, right? So basically millennials are Gen Y, right? That's the other nickname. Now there's no real general consensus on exactly when this generation starts and ends. But overall, on average, it's today's 15 to 35-year-olds. So born 1980 to 2000. To give you a feel for just how big this generation really is, and as I said, nobody can really determine where the beginning or end is. So they say 87 to 100 million people within this generation, which is amazing. So to give you a little bit of perspective on that, Gen X, which is today's 31 to 50-year-olds, I know that's got a little bit of overlap on Gen Y because of that kind of fuzzy edge of the generation, but that's 69 million, nearly 20 million fewer people in Gen X. And the boomer generation, today's 51 to 70-year-olds, that's nearly almost 10 million fewer. So the boomers were always a huge generation. So when you think about how huge Gen Y is, it's almost hard to wrap your brain around. And there's a great book called The Age Curve. It's by Kenneth Gronbach. I really recommend reading it. And in it, he says that Gen Y is going to be the largest, most powerful group of consumers that we have ever seen. And they're already consuming at 500% of their parents' level in adjusted dollars, which is just pretty unbelievable. So they have a tremendous amount of buying power. It's funny, a lot of times when people talk about millennials, they're like, oh, they're living with their parents, they don't have any money, they don't have any buying power. They are huge consumers, and they're just affecting so much. So, everybody calls them digital natives, right? They've grown up with, a digital environment, so they're digital natives, and the rest of us are, considered digital immigrants, right? We started with manual types of things, and now we're moving into digital. My friend likes to call us digital pioneers, not digital immigrants. I like digital pioneers. How about you, Steve?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, we're pioneers.
I am a digital pioneer. We were talking about, even before the meeting, how many different digital ways we were setting up to remind ourselves of this phenomenal webinar. So, right.
And so we do both, right? We did the digital stuff and we had the Post-it note. And that's what's great about us. We can do that.
Exactly.
So I have some interesting stats about, there's going to be a lot of interesting stats in this presentation, but some fascinating kind of stats about how hard millennials can be to reach. So only 6% think online advertising is credible, and 67% of them never click on sponsored stories. So a lot of these ways that we think we're going to get to them, they can completely tune them out. This is a fascinating one, too. 95% of millennials see their friends as actually their most believable source of product information. Let me turn that around for everybody. Only 5% see marketers as their most believable source of product information. So really, really, critical stats and interesting to think about their behavior. So this one's for me.
And really, and this is a good point. Every time we talk about this, I think of my kids, and my kids are millennials, and I think of their how they look and feel about digital and mail and stuff like that. So you're hitting some really good points here, because I see it in my own kids.
And they're entirely different. So it's pretty fascinating. So in doing this, in really looking into generational preferences, I decided that I really wanted to look at kind of, okay, what are the big guys doing right? Because the thing about millennial marketing is the concept, the topic isn't a new one. People have been talking about marketing to millennials, there's books about it, but everybody wants to talk about the big guys. Look at Coca-Cola, they're number 8 on the, in the top millennial brands. Well, they've got a $3 billion marketing budget. yes, they have a brand, a sticky brand that people love, but they also have $3 billion to play with. Nike's number one, and they have $2.4 billion in marketing spend. So that's awesome for them, but what about the rest of us, right? So what I really wanted to do is to look at, what works for the big guys, and, are there some, key characteristics and principles that we can glean from that and use for ourselves in both the B2B and B2C environments. So the good news is, regardless of budget, the same principles apply. So I'm going to cover these 10 principles that I basically was able to distill from all the research. So number one that just keeps coming up over and over and over and over again is the idea of, or the concept of authenticity. Are you authentic? They really can see through kind of the phony side of marketing or of putting a face on a brand. So, there's some questions to ask yourself as a company, okay? Are we who we say we are? Are we presenting ourselves, authentically? Are we transparent about what we do and how we do it? When something goes wrong, are we accepting responsibility for it, or are we hiding behind a bunch of legalese and hoping it goes away? Do we share the passion for what we do, what we make, whatever it is? Are we, passionate about what we're doing? That generation is really, really driven by passion. So, they're going to want to work for and work with companies that are passionate about what they do. Are we consistent about how we apply our marketing messages, or is it different on the website versus, the ad looks entirely different and something else looks different. We talk this way when we're talking to this group. Are we consistent about how we present ourselves? And lastly, do we care? Do we care about the people who work for us? Do we care about the environment? Do we care about the world around us? They're really, really looking at these things when they're evaluating not only who to buy from, but also who to work for. And that's a big thing as well when we're trying to understand millennials.
And I think this makes a lot of sense. If you look at each one of those steps that you just mentioned, it's all about parenting as well. You'll find that millennials really respond well to not only the way you market, but the way you parent, and the way you parent are those key points as well.
Absolutely.
They'll react better in their own lives.
No, it's interesting because there's that underlying thread across everything, right? It's how they buy, who they work with, who they work for, how they interact. It's just interesting how these all relate across the different categories. And it's about relationships too, right? Yeah, absolutely. So the second is accessibility. This is fascinating little stat here from Lithium Technology. 70% of Twitter users expect a response from brands they reach out to on Twitter. I think maybe all of us as business owners or whatever, expect that people, if they're reaching out to you, they do expect a response. However, they also expect that response in under an hour. 53% want that response in under an hour. So I think a lot of us knew that, they expected a response, but maybe we didn't realize that the clock was ticking. We had an hour. I mean, that's amazing. And then 72% want that response in under an hour when they have a complaint. So when they're unhappy, they actually really, really want that response in under an hour. Now, the interesting thing that came out of the study, however, is that they were able to determine that a negative brand experience can turn right over into a positive one if their needs have been addressed in a timely manner. You don't have to resolve the whole problem within that time frame. It's more the idea that I reached out, they acknowledge me, and they're doing something about it. Hey, I like these guys after all. So, but on the flip side, if you don't respond and if it just drops, that negative experience can become really negative, and you can do a lot of brand damage. So it's fascinating how quickly that can turn in one direction or the other, and how you can take a negative experience and actually turn it into a brand loyalty, experience instead. So, I think that's for all of us a little piece of encouraging news too, that something negative can turn to a positive. So,
well, yeah, and this next slide that you're going to be talking about, this human touch, and I think everybody in this call, with automated workflows and all the web to print stuff, you can't. This next slide that you're going to talk about, this number 3, is very, very important because you don't want to commoditize what you're doing on web to print, meaning that you should always have a human touch and at least pick up the phone and contact the people that are ordering your products or services through an automated process. This is good stuff.
Absolutely true, right? And in general, what's happening, right, is we live in this digital world where, automatic emails, automatic, responses, automatic, people, recorded voices on phones, stuff like that. So, that ability to have a human touch is really, really important. And what's happening is brands are kind of migrating from more intellectual connections to emotional ones. So if you think of like the Williams-Sonoma catalog, it used to be a catalog filled with pots and pans and really nice kitchen things. Now it's a catalog filled with pots and pans and really nice kitchen things and recipes and meet our chefs. And, here's some lifestyle inspiration. It's all about creating those emotional connections that drive brand loyalty and experiences. And that's because 95% of the decisions we make are based on emotion, which is kind of fascinating to think about. But when you think about it, it's basically true, right? You do things, you buy from people you like, you buy products you love, so much of what we do and how we do it is based on emotion. And so I have some interesting examples for everybody. This is from Zingerman's. They're in Michigan, and they have this catalog. It's super fun. But I wanted to show you the humanization of a brand. And what they do here in their advanced here, everyone, sorry, is they have in their catalog, staff favorites. This is Ari's favorite. This is Mike's favorite, like putting a face to a brand, not just, we're nice people who sell really nice things, not we're a company that has a bunch of food product. And it's that idea of adding that personal touch. This was a thank you note I got from Olive and Cocoa when I placed in a catalog order, and they hand wrote, this is true human handwriting, this is not a font, and they hand wrote me a thank you note. And sent it, which was amazing. It left a huge impression on me. This is something I got from King Arthur Flour. And I thought this was interesting because this wasn't necessarily a thank you. It wasn't a catalog. This was in with some baking materials that I ordered and said, we're here to help. Meet PJ. She's on our team, And so it was more of a, hey, we've got nice people who work here, and you can call our hotline, kind of adding that face to the product. So, or to product or service or brand. So really, really interesting. And
right, it's all about accountability. Yeah. Like it's accountability with face to something, so they know that it's not just a robot behind it. It's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and just relationships, right? Well, I think I like these people. They look like nice people. Kind of okay. I want to do business with them. Creating that relationship. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to share a few of the trends that I kind of uncovered along the way while I was doing research. These are just fun little vignettes or whatever. So there's a handmade and artisanal trend with millennials, and I think it's because they live in such a digital world that tangible experiences are pretty special, right? So Etsy is huge. Different crafts and knitting and all this stuff is kind of making a comeback. And I think my theory is because they live in this very kind of, digital world. So it's fun to roll up your sleeves and make something, at the end of the day. And I think, vinyl's coming back and, artisanal, brews and things like that are just kind of interesting things that are also kind of outside the mainstream. And I think that's just a very interesting trend. So just fun to kind of look at what resonates with millennials in general. So number 4 is consciousness. And this is a really, really, really important principle. So, and you're going to see, I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and then you're going to start to see it everywhere if you are not already looking for it. So just some interesting stats. 87% of consumers would actually switch brands if the other brand was associated with a good cause. So people are really thinking about, what companies are doing and where they want to spend their money. And, would even consider switching if somebody was doing something versus a company that wasn't doing, good, so to speak. So, and this is a really good one. Over 85% of millennials actually correlate, their purchasing decisions also to those efforts that the company's making. So, they're really thinking about, is that company making responsible efforts? And so just a great example, this is the company Life is Good. And this is what I want you to start looking for, because you're going to realize this is absolutely everywhere. This is their catalog. But the last page of their catalog, come on, there we go. The last page of their catalog has growing the good, and it's showing the, how they're giving back. And let me tell you something, start looking for this everywhere. You'll see it in every catalog, you'll see it on websites, you'll see like kind of, hey, and by the way, here's the thing that we're doing that's really nice, okay? And it's called cause marketing. That's the official term of it. So it's a form of marketing basically where for-profit and not-for-profit organizations partner together for mutual benefit. So it's actually a really big growing thing.
Yeah, one thing I'd like just to add on that is I think you could also keep it local, even though you may offer web to print or doing more of a broad national focus. You could pick something local that would be very impactful to you locally, versus like you could do like a Rotary, which is more of a national, but they have local groups, or even local cause. So I think this is a just really good information, Trish.
Oh, thanks. And I think you're right. Sometimes it is more of a regional thing or it's a global, depending on what your brand does. It's all about making sure that you are making an effort and, doing something as a company. And it's funny, now that I do this research, it's like I think so much about what I'm doing and how I want to help. It really does make you kind of go, yeah, we should be doing, great things.
Well, think about it, guys.
Studies. Yeah.
Yeah, think about it. Remember, it's a very competitive market. A lot of us provide, a lot of you provide the same services. So to have a niche or something special that makes your business stand out, it may be something that you all look at to help your business stand out above others.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's really important is also making it make sense with what you do as a company. So this is a great example. This is Warby Parker. This is a consumer. This is a B2C scenario. They have a buy a pair, give a pair program, where if you buy a pair, they help someone else get a pair, who needs one. They've distributed over 1 million pairs of glasses to people in need. And it's a great program. And part of what's great about the program is they make glasses, and they believe that everyone should have the gift of sight, and they should, so they help people get sight. It makes so much sense conceptually, right? If they gave away socks, I don't think we'd remember it. I think it would kind of be a disconnect. So this is another great one. This is a B2B. This is Sappy Ideas That Matter. So, I have a really tight relationship with Sappy. I've been with them for a long time now, and they have this program called Ideas That Matter, and they help designers help not-for-profit businesses by designing for good, basically. And they've given more than $12 million in support to over 500 charitable programs around the world. It's been a 15 or 20-year program. I mean, they were doing cause marketing before cause marketing was even a term. So, I think it, again, makes sense, right? They produce paper, and paper supports the print and the design and everything that the print materials that these organizations need. So, looking at that and thinking about cause marketing and what you might want to do, I just have some tips for everybody, right? You want to just make sure it's authentic, and it feels right with your company, and that, you've really got that, it makes sense, and it sounds and looks and feels like something you would be doing, right? Making a connection. We talked about Warby Parker. They make glasses, they give glasses. Sappy makes paper, they, provide print and design and whatever. It makes sense. And I think that's a really important part of people remembering it from a brand standpoint, and also for it to make sense with what you're doing. You also want to work it into your corporate culture, right? You want to make sure you've got buy-in from the people who are working for you, that it's a part of what you do and you support it. That type of stuff is very important to millennials as employees as well. So, and then, money, of course, is great, and it can be a big part of your support. But I think, everybody sees a big check as just a tax write-off. So, can you roll up your sleeves? Can you do other things besides just, sending a check in the direction of an organization, because it's the other things, how can you help in other ways that really make a difference and really stick with people, I think. So 5 is personalization. And, we were talking about how they have this ability to tune out marketing completely. So, personalize things that really feel like they're kind of, made for them and tangible. Those types of communications really, really stand out. And, the great news is that so much has happened in print media, over the past even 5 to 10 years that have really taken, the cost out of versioning, taking a lot of the cost, the complexity out of the process, and made it so that, we can all do amazing things that are really, standing out. And Steve, I know you've got just a really, really great product called AccuZIP Maps. So can you share a little bit on that?
Well, with the AccuZIP maps, they're relevance and infographics that focus, your message and deliver it in milliseconds. When you look at a map, you instantly know without, verbiage, what's going on. So infographics works because we're all wired for it. It's the science of infographics, right? It only takes 150 milliseconds for a symbol to be processed, like Facebook or something like that, 100 milliseconds to attach meaning to it. So you can look at a picture, something that's relevant to you, personal to you, and then turn that into something meaningful very quickly as opposed to reading text. I'll talk a little bit more about personalized variable maps later in our presentation, and so I'll leave it at that.
I love it. It's great technology, and it's such an opportunity to kind of put things into context for people. So I love it. It's visual. It's great stuff. So I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of that. So number 6 is speed. So this is just in general, right? Millennials need speed. They don't have a lot of patience for things to load. If your web page isn't loading quick, these types of things are really, really important. Quick clicks. And what I mean by quick clicks is, okay, you go to the home page of your website, is it easy to tell exactly where you can go to get to what you're doing, or are you going to make people search through all your menus and try to find something? It's kind of, how can you get them from point A to point B quicker? A fast checkout process. If you have a shopping cart at all, is it quick? Is it intuitive? Is it going to get them there? And then fast response. We talked a bit about this with accessibility, but this also applies to if they fill out an email form on your site, if it's social media, if it's a call, whatever it is, but that, accessibility / speed of response is really, really important. Here's another trend for everybody, the subscription box. And this really goes back to that idea of needing tangible things, right, and enjoying those tangible things in a digital world. So Birchbox is huge, very big. They deliver all these, fun, beauty items and things. Blue Apron. This one's neat because, again, it's about the experience of creating something. So the neat thing about Blue Apron is, they could have totally made the meal and had you just put it in the oven. But then you don't get the experience, right? So they're giving you all the parts and pieces. You, quote unquote, make it by putting the whole thing together. And so you feel like you were involved in part of it. So it's this tangible experience rather than this quick pop it in the oven type of a thing. It's learning, it's tangibility. And this is one of my favorites in the B2B space. So there are a lot of subscription boxes in the B2B space. This is parts and parcel. You get monthly paper goodness delivered. You can do quarterly or monthly or whatever. I love this. You just get the latest and greatest, all sorts of cool paper-related stuff. And again, tangible, fun, great for us creatives and printers. So good stuff. 7 is technology integration. So in general, millennials expect that their experience is going to be tech integrated, just no matter what. This is a fascinating stat and this is all of us, by the way. We now spend more than 8 hours a day consuming media, and so much of that is digital. When you think about, our computers and our cell phones and our laptops and our, podcasts and our this and our that. So print and tangible media has such an opportunity to be the quiet among the noise. So, you add print with all different types of technology like QR codes and personalized URLs and variable data and augmented reality and email. These are all great things. Print on its own stands strong, but when you combine it with different types of technology, you really can bridge into all these different experiences, which is pretty fascinating.
Right.
So
and then
Steve,
when
you got some goodies for us here.
Absolutely, yeah. When you drop the mail piece into the mail stream, it's super important to continue that communication process. So that need for speed that you were talking about earlier, when you're not communicating with someone and days are going by or hours are going by before you respond back to them, it's like an eternity, right?
It is.
And I keep thinking about my daughter and my kids every time you talk about this subject, and you really need that immediacy. So if you're not providing mail tracking or visibility right now, when you drop that mail piece into the mail stream and you're marketing to either B2B or B2C, then days, hours can go by before any of the communication is being done to your mail recipient. So make sure that you put some type of tracking in line when you drop a mail piece, whether it's letter, flat, or parcel, into the mail stream. And then that will allow you to make intelligent decisions right away. You can literally tell each piece with living mail, you can tell each piece when to do certain things based on certain trigger points. So, for example, on a specific date and time, on a specific, adjust your different time zones. Postal alerts, like if there's a delay or a catastrophe in an area, like that crane fell and where mail wasn't going to be delivered, it's certain. So the mail piece is actually making this decision geographically where it is. You can do, first scans, out for delivery scans, postal redirects if the mail piece is coming back to the mailer. You want to be able to communicate that back to your recipient. Courtesy reply, permit reply mail, business reply mail, IMPB, return triggers, like if you're mailing out a parcel and it's coming back to you. All of these are certain triggers which can form a connection to your customer. Some of the other ones could be weather triggers, like if they have a storm, in a certain zip code or city, thunderstorms, heavy snow, fog, tornadoes, cold, hot, windy, temperatures, humidity, wind speeds, whatever, based on that piece and wherever it geographically is in the United States and whatever conditions are occurring, you can communicate that back. And you can communicate in a variety of different ways, such as a conference call, text-to-speech, email, SMS, MMS, play recorded audios or text-to-speech, communicate through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google+, Tumblr, and Instagram, all because you track your mail and use some of these new technologies that are available for you.
I just love it. I find this part so fascinating, and for many reasons. I mean, not just for what the technology itself can do, but also because so many of us are doing these, cross-channel types of marketing campaigns where, do you really want to guess if somebody got the mail piece or not, or if that, before you trigger the email or the sales call or something that follows up, it's really all about making sure you've got a more complete picture, and so that you can have a seamless process, that touch point process along the way. It's so important, so I
making
love
those
the
decisions
ability
at
to
certain
do
points.
that. And to just really have that information behind you. It just makes so much sense. So I love it. Absolutely love it. So number 8 is social media, and I don't think this is a surprise, right? They're very, very social. And so just some general tips on this. Social media is social, so blatant sales pitches are a turnoff, big time. Also, keeping it short. I see so many times these like Facebook posts that are a mile long, or things that just taking forever to get there. Whether it's a video with a really long intro or something. It's like, just get to the point. Keep it moving. This is interesting. 41% of millennials abandon content because it's too long. So you just have to be thinking about kind of getting to the point, before they abandon the content. Use good social media manners. So, look, I'm Gen X. I had to learn how to do this stuff. I mean, it did not come naturally to me. If you don't know what the social media, protocol is, either hire some millennials or, get some training or whatever, but it stands out. When you don't use social media correctly, it stands out like a sore thumb, and especially stands out to millennials. Social media is social, so, interaction. I've seen a lot of companies where they push. They're pushing content, like share my stuff. And it's an interaction, it's social. So, you should be sharing and interacting and asking questions, not just pushing content on everyone all the time. So it is a give and take. And create some opportunities to share as well, with great content. And, this is just kind of an interesting one, having a sense of humor. So 70% of millennials, they share content because it makes them laugh. And I think if you think of a lot of the things that you do, kind of socially, something cracks you up and you want to share it. So look, a lot of us are in the B2B space. We can't always be hysterically funny all the time. It's not appropriate. But it's just interesting to know that that's such a big driver. The humor is such a big driver for shared content. So it's just something to think about.
And think about it. They're sharing your message with someone else that you didn't intend or send that piece to. So be creative, really comprehend what she's telling you here. I don't know if the video will be available after this, but this is very good information, because the more you can share your message to and pluralize it, the better, right?
Agreed. Absolutely. So here's another trend. This is just kind of fun. So the fan experience. We were talking about before, tangible experiences, all sorts of different, the idea of experiences. And so this is interesting. So there's a site called If Only, and this is a site where you can buy experiences. You can buy, golf with celebrities. This is a high-end thing, this in particular, but they also, you can buy an autographed, instrument or something, or whatever, VIP access, all sorts of things. But it's all about buying experiences. And this is something called a fanzine. I love this. So a fanzine is a magazine made by fans for fans. And this was AWOL, which is a group, and Polar is a brand of bike. I don't know a whole lot about adventure biking, but nonetheless, this is fascinating. They made this really well done magazine, and it was written in, the exact word, in the real words of these pros. So these guys, if you are in adventure biking, you know who these guys are. I do not, but this is in their their writing, and it's written in their voice, and it's got their photos, and they're using the Polar bikes, and they're going on this excursion, and this piece is filled with just great photos and all sorts of things. So it's made for fans, by fans, and by the way, a little bit of cause marketing. When people buy this, the proceeds go to an organization that helps people get bikes and get into biking. So it's just this really neat experiential type of product. So I thought that was just super cool. So 9 is rewards. So millennials love loyalty programs. I think this is fascinating because honestly, loyalty programs are not, I've said I'm Gen X, they're not a big motivator for me. So I just find it interesting how much they really like these loyalty programs. So 68%, 20 to 34-year-olds would change where they shopped if they could get more program rewards. This is a Bond Brand Loyalty 2014 study. So, big driver. And even a third reported buying something they didn't need or want just to earn points or increase that membership status. So, when you think about loyalty, and I know we're not all in the consumer space, we can't always, create these types of programs, but think about it, there's lots of ways to create, rewards for customer loyalty. So just understanding that it can be a real driver, I think, is important. And number 10 is ease of use. This one's very simple. There should be no barriers to entry in the brand experience. Easy access to the website, easy, whether you're online, whether you're a print material, whether you're in store or whatever you're doing, everything should be pretty seamless and intuitive. So just no barriers to entry. And I want to talk just for a moment about push versus pull. I talked a little bit about the idea of, push marketing when we were talking about social media. I met a guy named Tom Borgerding from Campus Media in Minneapolis, and he had a few tips for me after I had shared this content with him. And he said, utilize retargeting and remarketing efforts, change up the message. You should always be marketing to those who already know you. He also says to listen, and that millennials live their lives out loud. So you should be, taking a break from just pushing messages and also sit back and listen to what they're saying. Reach them on their mobile devices, things like geofencing, advertising, based on where they are, and, use video and push notifications and ads, like they're always on their mobile. So think about how to get to them on their mobile devices.
Right, and then more about the living mail, and then of course the maps as well. But with with the living mail and getting that experience and where they are, where not only where they're at, but where their own mail piece or their packages, and you're giving them that experience. And going back to personalized maps, they're receiving a mail piece at their home where they're at, and they're going to look at it, and maybe they want to know where you're marketing a home, like a real estate. You put a personalized map on there with directions to the new listing, or many of them 18 to 35 you were saying are going to be old enough to vote. Maybe they don't know where their voting place is, or maybe the poll place moved, right? So you could have a map on there that shows where the poll place is and stuff like that, or a pizza franchise, where they have 5 franchises in your area, and it gives you directions to the closest franchise. Urgent care facilities, it's just the list goes on and on and on. But living mail with the variable maps, keeping it personal.
I love it, and I love putting things into context visually for people. So it's just great stuff. Millennials also like conversation, shallow or deep, he said. So he said, don't just push messages. Don't expect to always have these deep conversations. Just talk. He said it can be shallow or deep. So I want to switch over to B2B for a minute because we talked about all these principles. And what I wanted to talk about is, just how influential millennials are in the B2B space now, and also how these principles apply in the B2B space. So 46% of potential buyers researching B2B products are millennials today. So that's up a huge amount, 27% since 2012. And they'll be 50% of our workforce by 2020. So, we really, need to think about the fact that there absolutely are buyers today. Now, the good news is in the B2B space, the principles that we've covered here are the same. What's different is the emphasis and how we apply them. So, what's hard in the B2B space, if you manufacture a widget, right? I mean, it's hard to get a bunch of followers on Twitter and Facebook and everything, So B2B companies definitely struggle to leverage social media, whereas in B2C, you usually kind of have an advantage there. Social media, though, is still obligatory in that space, but you use it to show leadership in the field instead. And so we'll talk about that. But where should businesses then focus their efforts? Definitely in mobile. Here's our big hint, right? Okay, so 42% of researchers are using a mobile device during the purchasing process in the B2B space, and that's only going to go up and up and up, right? We're all using our mobile. So, we have to think about that mobile-first strategy of making sure everything's responsive, right? That it looks the same on our monitor versus looking good on our iPads and our mobile devices. Making sure that our navigation is really intuitive. Speed of loading time, speed of access to the information, ease of use, and definitely integration of video. 70% of professionals researching products for B2B are using video across that path. So if you're not integrating video with your website, even in small little nuggets that, just thinking about how to integrate video is a big part of the purchasing process. So
one thing I'd like to
everybody. Sure.
I'm sorry for interrupting. One thing I'd like to say is what we're trying to do, and I'm sure you all could do this. You all sell products and services either to consumers or businesses. Get the businesses that are buying your products or services, or the consumers that are buying their products and services, to use their cell phone or their iPhone, right? And to take a picture or video of themselves using your product, and then have them allow you to publish it maybe on your website. And I think those are great ideas, and we're implementing those here on our side too.
Yeah. People love the case studies, also the how it's made, how it works side of things. That's pretty fascinating. Those kind of quick little, easy, fun things that kind of share a little bit of background on how things are done. So this is an interesting thing. I decided that I would take a really, really difficult, let's say challenging company from the B2B standpoint and see how they did. In kind of the social media space and in the marketing space, because B2B is a little bit tougher, right? So I found this place called Yazoo Mills, and they manufacture paper tubes. And, the way I discovered these guys, I'm not in their target demographic, but somebody had sent these to me along with a bunch of samples. And I remember picking it up and going, even the paper tube people have to market themselves. I mean, gosh, I think sometimes I have a challenge, and I look at them and I'm like, you've got to make paper tubes and cores sound exciting, So how are these guys marketing themselves within today's marketing space? And so I decided I'd take a look at them, and I found it absolutely fascinating. This is their tagline, paper tubes, it's what we do. So I wanted to start by looking at their website. I was pleasantly surprised, very well done. Quick click access to all of their information, light, bright, modern, organized. There is a video right on their homepage, so they're also using video across the path, and it's a cool kind of how it's made type of video that's really fun. But I was like, well, they can't be mobile friendly. I mean, they're a tube company. Well, they definitely had, very practical, but they were definitely, mobile friendly, which a lot of B2B companies are not. So what about social? I mean, all I could think in my head was, what are they going to do? Here's my little tongue-in-cheek version of what I could only imagine, right? Facebook, like us for up-to-the-minute paper tube news. Paper tube crafts for kids, right? What could it possibly be? Well, they surprised me. They did really, really well. So they had a blog, well-populated, and we were talking about how social media You can establish leadership using social media in the B2B space. So they've got all these, I'm not into what they do, but I can tell you that they covered all sorts of topics, and it's a well-populated blog with professional information that's well-written. So, if somebody's looking for that product, they're going to find it, and they're going to see the leadership there. Really professional LinkedIn page, very well-written, very well done, in line with their brand. There's their YouTube channel, and they've got some videos. They don't have a lot of videos, but they have a couple of videos, and they're starting to use video along the purchasing path, consistent branding. This is their Facebook. And so it's funny, I look at this, they do have some of the little crafts and some of the other things, they use it as an opportunity to do, whatever they want and to push out their blog posts and other things as well. They also have a Twitter page, respectable. They're pushing out their content. They have tons of followers, but they have a steady brand. They're consistent in how they're putting out their message, and they're applying it across the different channels. But do they care, right? We talked about cause marketing, right? That's kind of one thing that I was like, okay, but how about cause marketing? They have a really big recycling program, so great, environment, check. Caring about the world, check, check, check. It's a huge recycling program. And then they also have cause marketing. They give to a cause that's important to them. It's called Olivia's House. So there's not a huge connection between what they do as a company, but, look, they're a paper tube company. I'm not sure you could find a charity that's, a paper tube related. But anyway, I thought this was really interesting that they were doing all of these different things. But one of my favorite things was I was watching a TED Talk, and then I realized that they were following me. So they were also remarketing, using Google Ads. And I thought, and again, strong brand, carrying it through. They were kind of, following me for a little while to also make sure I didn't forget who they were. So I thought they were doing an outstanding job across all those different channels. And they have, a really difficult challenge given what they do. So my tip to everyone is if a paper tube company can do it, you can do it too. So there are a few preferred attributes for doing business that I think are important. Just in general, these came out of an IBM business value study in 2015, and they interviewed millennials to see why they, what their preferred attributes are for doing business with any given company. And so ease of doing business with them was number one. Their willingness to collaborate. This all goes to, by the way, and ease of doing business, thinking about those principles, speed, technology integration, seamless, willingness to collaborate all goes to accessibility and, human connection, all those different things. And then industry and marketplace expertise. And we talked about how social becomes a way to stand out, through leadership, right? And so how can you be found, as a leader within your industry? So in general, millennials love analytics. They also really, really listen to the opinions of others. So this is a Google and Millward Brown study where they determined that 70% of B2B decision makers are beginning their research through a generic online search. Now, I think earlier generations have kind of gone by, well, what was the history of, who did we use before, and maybe they'd start there. It's a very interesting opportunity to know that 70% are really looking at, giving everybody kind of the benefit of the doubt to start. I mean, I think that's outstanding. That means we all have a chance. So you have to make sure that, your SEO is in line and that your blog posts are, tagged correctly and things like that so that you get found. So because of that, they're very open-minded, which is a wonderful benefit. But interestingly, whether they're spending their own money or someone else's, they always expect the best value, and they're going to go for it and get it. So I have a few, just to tie things up here for everybody, I have a few just interesting case studies or examples for everybody. It's just interesting to see some of these things in application. This is from my friends at Allied Printing, and this was a piece, and this is a sample piece, but you can kind of get the feel for it. It was folded in half. And so when students applied to a college, right, they read an essay. And so what the school did, Seattle University, was all the accepted students, they grabbed one excerpt, they chose one excerpt from every accepted student's essay, and they sent it to them as a poster. Sam sample, your words have made an impression on us, so we made an impression of them. At Seattle University, you are one of one, and nothing could be greater. And then the student opens this poster up, and it's their quote from their essay that they recognize, attributed to their name, and there's hashtag SU One of One, which is a social media campaign for Seattle University. So they took this, they took digital, variable data, digital printing, personalization, human connection, pulled them all together into this amazing and impactful piece. And I think we all know from a college perspective, right, there's a big difference from accepted student to enrolled student, and you have a narrow window of time there. And so they really, really made a connection. This is a piece from Sol Ross. Yes?
One thing is, and I don't want people to lose, your back a few slides, you said whether B2B or B2C, millennials expect the best value. Now remember, everyone, that the best value is not going to necessarily be monetary. It could be you're like an expert in your area or an expert in your particular method of doing something. So the value can be perceived value, not monetary. So it's not like you have to give away the store. As a matter of fact, I'm a big proponent on never discounting anything. So don't discount stuff, provide more value, because that's really what they want. Not necessarily the cheapest price, but they want the value as far as expertise, knowledge, trust.
That is such a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that absolutely rings true. That's the truth. Value is not always monetary. So they kind of weigh the whole picture. Yep, that is outstanding.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So this is Sul Ross State University. This is interesting. It's a dimensional piece from structural graphics. And this was an interesting one because I actually have the case study information. They ended up with when they did that piece, which was a dimensional piece, and it was personalized with variable data, digitally printed, 26% increase in applications over the previous year. So huge. It was a standout format, definitely personalized, right? So really directly to them, and tangible, targeted audience, and it was memorable because it was so different. This is a fun one because this is so simple. This is just two panels glued together with little perfed windows. Live it, feel it, breathe it. This is from my friends at Ryder Dickerson in Chicago. This is for RMU. And so what's neat is they integrated technology in a very simple format mailer, tradition, passion, and the third one opens too, but I didn't want to block the other. But all you see is a universal code for play video right there. And so all they did is they made QR codes, and this piece was responsible for capacity crowd at their open house event. And once you get that scan on the QR code too, you get a tremendous amount of information. So it was a creative format, interactive, great integration of mobile, great integration of video, taking them to that next place, and then simplicity of concept, which I think is just a benefit. This is in the B2C space, and the reason I want to show this is, this is Tom's Shoes. They just hit kind of everything on the list, and they really, really know how to market to millennials. And so I'm just using this because it's a great B2C example. They sell shoes, but their catalog is called Journal This is Haiti, and it's all about a trip to Haiti. And the people featured in the magazine are not models. They're actually part of the marketing team, and they identify who they are, and they give their social media, their Twitter handles. Follow them on Twitter. This is such and such, and this is what they do. Humanization of the brand, okay? Immediately. This is a shoe catalog, but you can see that the shoes are secondary, if not tertiary, to what else is going on. You've got a lifestyle photo. You've got show us your story, right? Here's all the different platforms. Take a picture of yourself, enjoying your life in your Toms, and you could get in our catalog. That experiential side of things. That really promotes brand loyalty, lifestyle, aspiration, all of that. Oh, and by the way, we make some great shoes. This is their cause marketing. They, in particular, oh my goodness, they must have 5 or 6 or more programs going on through this catalog. However, they're really, really authentic about it. And that's what really is so great about what they're doing. It's kind of, we buy shoes, we help people in Haiti, they've got multiple programs, but yet it feels authentic because it is authentic and it's who they are as a company. And so that, again, is such a big part of what resonates. And again, they make a great product too. I think if they made bad shoes, I don't know that we'd be talking about this. So that's a given, right? They have to make a great product, but it's all these other things that support as well. So authentic, they're using social media, integrated, humanizing the brand. They've got user-generated content, which is a big thing. The ability to participate in a brand experience, cause marketing, lifestyle inspiration, check, 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 everything. So they're really, 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 setting that example. So in general, right, we talked about the principles. Think about them, follow them, think about how you can apply these different principles and technologies into your environment. Commit to a strategy, think about what you're doing, and think mobile, right? That is such a big part of it. It's how they're, it's how they're connected. It's what they use all the time, video, social, searching for information on the purchasing path. They're using those throughout. And so if you are not, if you don't provide a good mobile experience, you should really, really focus on that. And that's that. So
Hey Trish, great job.
Thank
and
you.
on that mobile part you just hit on, which is great. It seems more difficult than it really is. But going back to what I was saying, how people, have your customers take interactive videos of how they use your products or services, or just about maybe how it's integrated into their life or something like that. And then, like Trish showed you on that other one, where they had a nice little simple cutout where you open it up and have it play with a QR code next to it. That could be your mobile presence, right? So you have your piece with some simple play button, like a photograph on the mail piece, postcard, where a QR code's right next to it showing a call to action, and then they scan it and they watch this video. That's your mobile presence. It doesn't take a lot of...
And it also doesn't take a ton of money, right? I mean, that's the great part is, with a little bit of creativity, a lot of these things are quite simple in execution. It's just a matter of being a little bit creative and making sure that there's a follow through on it, making sure that they're going to, if they're scanning that QR code, they're going to a mobile site. They're not going to some just random, this just big web page and, leave it up to them to find out where they're going next. Like, they have to have a reason to scan. They have to, have a compelling way to get there. You have to kind of think about what it is you want from that, scan or that experience and how you're going to drive them there. But, a lot of these things are very, very, very accessible for any business and any marketing budget.
Right, and you don't think it's boring. I mean, you might be printing letterhead or something, but then there's that one customer that just stands out, and they're more than happy to do some of this stuff for you guys, and you can not mention their name, but just show the experience of your technology, maybe something you did great in the print or the fold or some idea that somebody used. So anyways, great job, Trish. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So I wonder if we have any questions.
Thanks, Trish, and great job, and a lot of great feedback here. We do have a question here. It says, are there any statistics on millennials moving into positions in business and gaining purchasing powers and decision-making power?
Boy, very specifically to that, I mean, I guess I can only point to the fact that, what was it, there'll be 50% of our market, by 2020. We had they're currently, goodness, I'd have to go back to that slide. I'm sorry, I went through a lot of
stuff. Exactly.
But they're definitely, a huge part of the B2B buying experience. So I would say they're definitely, having an effect and affecting purchasing decisions, maybe more so than we all had even realized. So, I don't know that I've seen the specifics,
So I guess the follow-up to that would be, in the earlier slides in the presentation, there was the slide regarding the buying power, as you just referenced, and I guess that doesn't necessarily apply to consumer purchasing. It applies to them purchasing in business as well, or was that more of a kind of a B2C type?
That was definitely a B2B stat.
Okay. So that indicated. Another question we have here, in companies and with all the companies that you work with, who owns this? It seems like it's a hard. I guess maybe I guess the question here is, who owns it within the companies, and who's responsible for doing all of the things that you just demonstrated here?
Yeah. So I think it's twofold. So I think no matter what, you have to have buy-in at the executive level, or else you can't. It's a corporate culture thing in many cases, right? I mean, there's kind of a cultural thing that has to happen. You have to kind of embrace, some of these different principles and cause marketing and transparency and some of these other things that may not come naturally or may not have been kind of the way that you operated in the past. And then from there, there's a whole kind of marketing and social side as well, where you kind of got to have, that marketing side and that marketing strategy that says, okay, this is how we're going to present ourselves. This is how we're going to interact. This is our social plan. So I think it's combined, right? I think it's marketing and I think it's executive leadership, because marketing's hands are kind of tied if executive leadership is saying, yeah, we're not comfortable with that. So I think, you can't have the two fighting against each other.
Yeah, and the buying power of the millennial is massive, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I believe I heard it was last night, by 2018, the buying power of millennials will be larger than the buying power of baby boomers. So
wow.
It's a big, big industry, and we've been focusing on it for at least a couple of years now. Really, this information is extremely valuable. I would, take a lot of this to heart. You don't have to do everything. You can start with the simple things.
Crawl, walk, run,
the first thing is never forget about the personal touch. I find that more and more businesses, and I go to a lot of seminars, a lot of trade shows, a lot of this stuff, and everybody's worrying about automation. Everybody's going to automate themselves out of business, because if you automate yourself too much, where you have all your processes automated, and you think, oh, this is great, people go to my website and order product, all you're doing is commoditizing what could be a great thing. So always keep that personal touch. Pick up the phone and say, hey, I got your order through our automated process, and create those relationships, because that's what millennials want. They want someone to talk to and someone they can trust.
Agreed. That's great.
One last question that did just pop up. Are the millennials aware of how unique they are, or do they think that everyone is just like them?
That's a fun question.
My daughter, she's
I
special.
think that I think they do think they're special. But I think we spend a lot of time talking about them as millennials, and so I think they do probably feel like, okay, we get it. We're millennials. We're different. I think every generation has had, some generation point at them like, you guys are different, but they really have, with this whole digital native versus digital immigrant thing, there is a huge difference between, and the onset of social media that's changed everything. So I think, it has been a challenge, and I think they do know that, they're changing the shape of things for all of us.
Yeah, and I think with so much inundating all this digital presence, to be honest with you, they're probably at some point they like to have that personal touch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
agreed.
My daughter, she's on the cell phone all the time, but they value that personal, and you mentioned that several times in all your slides.
Yeah.
The touchy-feely stuff. So, good stuff, Trish.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
A lot of fun.
Opportunity.
It's great to be
Epicomm
here.
has done a great job.
Yeah, excellent job, guys, and a lot of great stuff here. I do notice that we are bumping up against our 1 hour, 60-minute deadline here. So with that, I'd like to say this concludes today's program, and we thank everyone for their participation. We also want to remind you again that this webinar has been recorded and will be available on the Epicomm community in a day or two, within the next few days. And I definitely want to make a special thank you out to AccuZIP for their generous sponsorship to enable us to bring you this type of content into our programming. So with that, I would like to thank everyone, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks.